And, just so anybody watching this from our side of things, from Rochdale perspective, really, the numbers, people say, why is Keighley doing what they're doing? Why is Barrow doing what they're doing? Well, first and foremost, they've got, Barrow had 2,000 people coming through the gate last year, which means they can push on and they can go into Championship and they can get halfway up Championship this year. And I wouldn't put it past Keighley doing the same. But when you pull that back to the reality of the situation, it's the 2,000 people going through the gate at Barrow that's pushing that club on. It's the 1,600 people at Keighley that are pushing Keighley on. There's no real money men in the background throwing major money at it. So I think what I'm getting at is as owners, we'll help sustain a club. But the only real way you can push a club on is when you get more people come in.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Dockhouse Rugby Show. Joining us once again this week is Rochdale Hornets chairman and good friend of the show, Mr. Andy Mazey. Andy, welcome from me and Dave.
Thanks very much. It's great to be back with you boys.
Yeah, it's great to see you again. A lot's happened since we last spoke, Andy, and we're going to get straight into it.
Hi, Andy. We spoke before, and we spoke several times in between the show. It's always interesting, great to catch up with you. And I want to talk about League One, really. League One that I've followed quite closely this year, watched some of the matches live, watched some of them on streaming devices. And I think the quality and the entertainment has been exceptional. And there's been a few surprises along the season. But Keighley, I watched them early season in the warm-up game against Oldham, and Oldham actually beat them in the warm-up, although they did use a lot of their squad. But they've run away with this league and they've looked fantastic. What's your experience of League One this year, Andy?
Very much what you've just said, an outstanding competition, really, from right from the outset, really. Keighley, they didn't have the best of pre-seasons, but from minute one to the end of the season, they've been unbeaten and they've been pretty much untouchable and invincible. Call it what you will, but they've not. Nobody's really managed to lay a glove on them, have they? So, congratulations first and foremost to Keighley. What a great season they've had. And then I think beyond that, it's been a really ultra competitive from places 2 down to 6 or 7. Right up until the final day. I think Hunslet could have got sneaked into the playoffs. So, from 2 to 7, not a great deal in between those teams, and a fantastic competition, which one that probably doesn't get the profile it deserves and the coverage it deserves. But anybody involved in it, or from a spectator point of view, I think it's great. It's a great spectacle to watch.
Yeah. Oh, you call it the pure breed of the sport, Dave? Is it?
I do. Yeah, I've been mocked and teased about that, really, calling it pure, because I think it is. You look at Super League, it's full of super athletes, full-time professionals. Are very quick, very sharp. They're in training every day. They get all the recovery, get all the video work. It's so clinical. You watch League One, there's some exceptional talent. The talent's still there, but these guys are often in full-time employment, training on an evening, under poor floodlights, trying to get out there and do the training. They're doing the gym work when they can in between. And you'll get some players who are highly skilled, but maybe not at the fitness levels they need to be because they're full-time work. You get some guys who are super fit, but maybe don't have the skill levels to go up the leagues. And that's a nice mishmash to watch. You watch those clash of abilities and fitness levels, and you get big guys and little guys, and you get a bit more time on the ball, I think. So, the playmakers have a bit more time to pick out passes. In Super League, they get a fraction of a second, and it's always a very flat pass. You get a few more looping passes in League One, putting people through gaps. So, yeah, I feel it's a lot more pure, and you get the feeling that you're watching a great version of the sport. So, entertainment-wise, I've enjoyed League One matches far more than Super League matches very often, even though I know the standard isn't as high. It's been just as, more entertaining, I would say. And yeah, some of those results you mentioned, Andy, I've just got the league up in front of me. North Wales were flying early season, doing really well, and then they tailored off a little bit. Rochdale had a really good start. I thought they looked really strong early season, and then some of the score lines started to dip away a little bit. I was a bit worried about a real fall, and you had a change at Rochdale. Do you want to talk us through a little bit about your thoughts on how that season progressed from the start to the middle there?
Yeah, I think, like you say, we had a good start. We had a good Challenge Cup run early doors, and pretty positive start to the season. I think with League One, I'm a great believer in that. There's games which, without being disrespectful to clubs, you would expect to win when you're spending the sort of salary cap and budget we've spent this year and last. There's games that you understand are the big games, and the ones that you're really going to need to win if you're going to achieve your season's objectives. And I think in terms of our change, it probably came at the point we realised that we weren't beating the teams that we would need to beat in and around us if we wanted to achieve our season's objectives. So we'd gone to places like Swinton, where you're expecting a tough game, but not really performed and been disappointing. And I think Matt, the coach, was disappointed in that. And obviously, there was other games which, no disgrace in losing at Keighley for all the reasons we've just discussed. They've been outstanding. But we felt that those games in and around us, the Swinton game and a couple of others that we felt were critical games, we didn't perform, we didn't turn up, and we really disappointing. And we just felt that, in these situations, sometimes it's not about the coach. Sometimes the playing group are not, for whatever reason, they're not sort of performing. So we just felt that a change was needed, really, just to freshen things up and change the way we were, the way we were playing and the way we were doing things, and improve the discipline. Primarily, that had been a criticism levelled at us as a club for a couple of seasons. Really, our discipline wasn't really, on par for where you'd like it to be and where you'd expect it to be. And I think that's the one thing. If the big thing I'd point to in terms of what Gary's done since he's come in, I think he's just managed to get the ear of the players and get an arm around people and get them doing things a little bit differently in respect to the discipline and probably a little bit more basic, back to basic, and making sure we're completing more sets, because when you complete your sets, you give yourselves an opportunity to win games, don't you? So yeah, those are the reasons, really. And we've I don't believe it's certainly not a negative on anything that Matt was doing at the club. He worked his socks off. He was a hard-working coach. He's a good. You guys know him. He's a great guy, a top bloke. We just felt that sometimes, you reach a point where a change sometimes can just make things give you a different direction and give you that impetus to try and move forward.
Well, one thing that we like to sometimes ask Andy is some of the questions that the fans and the supporters of a club don't generally get to see, because they see what goes on the field. They don't see the. What's it like at a club when a new coach comes in? What's kind of like the process? How do all the players openly, respond to that? Do some favour the old coach and are a bit sort of more reluctant to change? How does the embedding in of a new coach into a club go?
To be honest, it's one that I've never been involved in replacing a coach before, or parting of ways, shall we say. So I'm not the most experienced person involved in that scenario, but I think you're always going to get players that are at a club primarily, for the coach. They've bought into the coach and bought into his vision, and maybe come on board purely down to the fact that a particular coach is there. So you're going to get that. But I think largely and generally in our case, the situation was we had a couple of guys who maybe decided they didn't want to continue, or the time was right to hang the boots up. But generally, I think everybody just bought into the fact that the decision's been made. We're moving in a different direction, and I think in our situation, Gary agreed to take the job on. He was already in the club. He was already assistant coach, so the players knew him. They trusted him, and it wasn't as if we were bringing somebody from outside of the group into the club. And then I think that could possibly be a little bit different. But with Gary, he already worked with the staff. He understood, the abilities of the players. He understood the mindset of certain individuals and how to get the best out of them, maybe. Or, some need a little bit of a kick, some need a little bit of an arm around them. I think Gary he didn't need to find his feet with that. He knew the situation already,
So he was a fresh pair of eyes, but from within the circle already then.
Yeah, and I think, I think that was the key thing, really, is that continuity. And I think that was the reason Gary, I rang Gary and asked him would he take it till the end of the season. for that very reason. I think the group needed that continuity. The group needed that, that familiarisation. Have we brought somebody in to take that on an interim basis? I think it could have been, very different to how it's played out this year. And, I think all things considered, I think Gary's done. He's had some real adversity to deal with, to be honest. Yeah. You may well have seen the issues with player injuries, suspensions, and unavailability for other reasons. It's been a difficult time. We could only field 14 against Keighley in the final game of the season, the regular season. So, with all things considered, I think he's done a great job. And the general feeling is, people are playing with a smile on the face now and enjoying playing again. And I think all signs are pretty good.
Yeah, and they're real struggles as well. Like we mentioned this with Rod Studd in a previous show that we've just done, and we were on about teams have injuries and they're not going to play with the big stars and the big forwards, but they've still got a squad of 20 odd to pull from. You're turning up at games with 14 players. That's hard at the coalface, isn't it? It's listen, lads, if two of you go off, we're scuppered.
Well, that was the situation really. In the build-up, the week leading up to that game, we had suspensions. Obviously, we had injuries, which you know about. But then a few days before, we had a situation whereby there was 2 games on the weekend or over the bank holiday weekend. So Super League clubs had not only a reserve team to field, but they had 2 games over a weekend. So I think across the board, they pretty much pulled all the players back. So all our loan players were unavailable. Right. When you add that to the fact that, you've got the injuries, the suspensions, it really was a nightmare. And to a point where we weren't the only ones, that particular weekend, Hull KR only fielded 16 in their Super League fixture. So it was difficult for everybody. I just think because everything combined on that particular weekend for us, it just meant that we could only run with 14. And you're very nervous then, aren't you? Because if you get one, as you say, an early injury and you're really up against it. But it worked the opposite way for us, to be honest. Gary got his rotation right. He had one forward on the bench and he just rotated his forwards.
You're going on every 10 minutes.
Yeah, literally that. It was literally, Fui, you're coming on off in 10 minutes. Joe, get yourself on. And then a cycle, just giving people a bit of a rest. And I spoke to Andrew Henderson after the game, to be fair. And Andy Henderson said to me, he said, that's the best anyone's played against us this year. And he said, I think that situation actually helped you. He said, because not sometimes in a game, you can lose momentum when you make your changes. And he said, because you weren't making wholesale changes and just rotating, you kept up the tempo and you never really dipped and kept going. And he said, it was, I thought Gary got it spot on in terms of the changes he made and kept the momentum. And we actually scored 24 points against Keighley in that game, which was the most anybody had done this year. Nobody had managed to put 24 points on them. So I think that's a remarkable effort, really, with 14.
Well, just improving it. Just turn up with 15 next time.
Well, that was it. Yeah, we'll go one better next week. We'll get an extra one on bench. But
it's a good way to coach it. Yeah, keep lowering your players until you win. Yeah, there's flawed logic in that, though, I think.
Yeah, it's not going to last long, is it?
I don't think that adversity, though, does any harm at times, because I think just watching the group, as they've got tighter and closer towards the back end of the season, and they rolled out of that game into the Oldham game, the first playoff game and the Derby game, and I think a lot of people had Oldham down as favourites in that because they'd come good at the right end of the year, and we were struggling numbers wise, and so a lot of people were fancying Oldham, and I just thought that adversity the week before and doing it tough, it really galvanised the lads and bonded them. And I thought, that Oldham game, we really showed a real lot of character and resilience and toughness. And they carried that forward into the North Wales game last week. So really couldn't be any prouder of them. Right across the board, from Gary to the staff to all the players and the fans. I've got to mention the fans, but they've been, literally, I know it's an old saying, that 18th man, it gets used a lot, but I think they have genuinely been an 18th or a 15th man.
15th man, yeah.
In your case, a 15th man. And pick up on something you mentioned earlier, Andy, when you was talking about the changes that you made and Gary coming in, and you spoke a lot about the personal approach, so speaking to the players, trying to get the best out of them, improving discipline, decision making. I've made a note here, that's all the psychological side. It's not actually the stuff you do. It's not running up and down. It's not doing your sprints and fitness training. It's not passing the ball. It's not moves. It's all around the mental approach to it and your tactics.
Psychological warfare.
It's it's a lot less. Was that on your mind when you did it? Is that what you felt the players needed at that time, or has Gary changed the training anyway? Is it still the same training nights, training times, or has he mixed it up a little bit, changed the training to freshen things up?
No, I think the general feeling was, I've a lot of respect for Matt, and I worked closely with him for a couple of years, and I was watching, as you not closely, but from afar as to how he was doing things, and he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was doing what I'd seen coaches do, and and there was nobody more committed to that role. And I think, we've seen it time and time again in sport and in football. Sometimes the playing group are just not. It's just not happening for whatever reason. And I think it was genuinely a case of that, really. And the feeling after that Swinton game was that, maybe just a change of voice or a change of doing things slightly different would hopefully change the way the outcomes of games, because we were seeing too many red cards, yellow cards, and struggling from that perspective. And sometimes that just a change of voice or doing things differently can just change that. And I think it has done. So it wouldn't be, as I say, I've never been negative towards Matt in any way. And I think. Yeah. We were both honest, and he's an honest guy, and he's a Rochdale legend, which makes it even more difficult. But I think he knew that it wasn't, after that Swinton game, it wasn't working, and we were honest enough to look at each other in the eye, and we spoke about that. And then it's not something you want to do. It's a disappointing thing to have those conversations, but it was felt that for the betterment really of the club, and to it wasn't a case of with a chance of getting promoted if we change the coach. Or I think it was just to try and improve the performances, improve things on a week-to-week basis, and see where it went. It's never been a case of we've got to get promoted or we've got to reach the playoff final. That was just a case of let's just try and improve things gradually, get the discipline right, improve the performance levels, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not a reflection on Matt as such. He's done a good job, but sometimes, as you say, things just need freshening up a little bit, a slight different change. Talking a little bit more around League One as such, we did a show just a few weeks ago about a trip to Cornwall. We went down to Cornwall and engaged with that. How did you find your trip down to Cornwall, the new boys of League One?
To be honest, I didn't go. It was the bank holiday weekend, and I had something on, so I couldn't make it down there. But by all accounts and all the reports that I heard from our camp and from everybody that went, it was an enjoyable. They enjoyed the experience, to be fair. And it's one of those. I've been in two minds on it. I was thinking at a time when the game is at League One level, it's encountered a lot of funding cuts and isn't exactly pulling up any trees. I was thinking, is it the right thing to be putting a team from Cornwall in that competition? But I think generally, I know they've not had the greatest time on the field in terms of results, but for a first year, I think Neil's done a great job, Neil Kelly, and what he's done.
Yeah.
And I think they've given, they came to us and put a real good performance in at our place, and I know they gave Oldham a good game the week after. So I think all things considered, it's been a successful first year for them, and I'm pleased for them. I'm pleased for Neil Kelly because he's a gentleman of the game. He's a real nice guy, and they've had some good. So we had a player leave us to go down there. Tom Ashton went, and he was enjoying. I know when I spoke to him recently, he's enjoyed his experience. So it can only be seen as a positive, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, for their first season, for them to finish 10th and not bottom, all right, it was in the bottom two, but they weren't bottom. They weren't, they can take from that. They can build on that. And like you said, Dave, they've got to start to build a loyal fan base, and the crowds are totally behind them as well. So, yeah, good luck to them.
I really enjoyed it. What I particularly enjoyed is no politics. You find less politics, I think, in League One. You're not discussing the ref as much and all all those negative parts of rugby league. They were just enjoying the match, and I just went down there and just enjoyed watching the game of rugby, and it was an entertaining game of rugby. The people were dead chatty. I was walking around making a pest of myself, talking to people, introducing
Not like
myself.
you, Dave.
He does that in Tesco's.
Yeah. They've not invited me back next year, though. I don't know why, but no, it was great fun. I really enjoyed it, and it's just nice to watch a game without worrying about all the politics that go with it. And there's a lot of that good happens in League One. And you're right. You talk about the playoffs, sir. It was touch and go with Oldham. Oldham were outside the playoff spots for a while. Had a good run near the end, and just crept in there. And they gave it a good go. I thought they'd go well. I couldn't call it against Rochdale because, as you say, he'd had some adversity and he'd been struggling for numbers, and the results were on the up. So you wondered whether you had a team, and Rod Sud won't like me for saying this, with momentum. It just crept in.
Doesn't exist.
Against yourselves, but you've done really well there, and done well against the early leaders of the competition, North Wales Crusaders, who were particularly strong early in the season, and now you find yourself going into the weekend into a big game. How confident are you, Andy?
Yeah, I'm confident in this playing group that we've got and this group of people. I couldn't be any more confident, really. I think in terms of the game itself, Doncaster's a tough ask for anybody.
Yeah.
I know, speaking with Carl Hall, who's a good friend of mine, he was disappointed in their result, probably more so the performance at the weekend against Swinton. So they're going to be smarting, they're going to be hurting. Nobody likes getting beaten, and he's got a good coach there in Richard Horn, and a great, there's some fantastic players there. You only need to read some of the names at this level. You've got your Watson Boases of the world, Papua New Guinean international, and you've got Ben Johnson, who's a championship halfback playing in League One, if we're being honest. Same with Connor Robinson. They've got two real good halves. They've got a big pack, a strong pack, and then you look at the three quarters, and they've got people like Missy Telapapa in the centre, and the big guy, the other big guy down over there as well. So it's going to be a real tough game, a big ask. But then again, so was North Wales and so was Oldham. So I'm really confident in the lads, and I think for me every week now is a bonus. And I think we the way we're playing, I fancy us against anybody, but equally we know that Doncaster's a tough one, and you reach this stage of playoffs, and there's no sort of mugs left in there, is there at all? So
no, there's no.
We're not overconfident. There's no arrogance whatsoever. There's a massive amount of respect, both on and off the field. The way Carl Hall, Carl operates that club, and the number of years he's been involved in rugby league, he's got nothing but my utmost respect, and he's a good friend, and so we're going to go there, going to enjoy the day, we're going to give it 100%, and hopefully that's enough.
Yeah, well, the best of luck with that. There's not much between you in the league, is there? Just a couple of games, I think. They won a couple more in the league, and Swinton just won more than that, so there's not a great deal between those clubs now, and it really just, I imagine, comes down to a bit of form in them one-off games and into who'll go through. So the best of luck with that, Andy. Moving on now, you've got an inclusion in the World Cup, haven't you? You've got doing quite a bit of work with Fiji. Do you want to talk us through some of that?
Yeah, we're really proud, obviously, with the Fijian history and heritage connected to our club and town. We're really proud to be hosting the Fijian National team ahead of the World Cup, and they're going to be based over in Rochdale. We've got a civic reception with them. There's a lot of activity via our community foundation. We were successful with some funding bids around that, so that we can deliver some real meaningful community engagement and really touch that Fijian community. So obviously we're really disappointed not to be hosting the actual game, which we were supposed to be doing. The England-Fiji warm-up game, that was supposed to be at our stadium, but we've moved on from that disappointment and turned the negative into a positive, and it's probably just motivated us and galvanised more to go out and do some more meaningful work in the community around that, the Fijian arrival and the time they're going to spend with us. And it's massive because obviously that community that we've got is, I think it's, I'll get corrected on this, but I think it's the second largest Fijian community in the UK, in Rochdale, outside of London. So it's huge. It's huge to be able to go and engage and bring that. Let's be honest, that Fijian team is a superstar team. It's full of NRL players and some real top quality rugby league stars, and that's to have those in our town and go and visiting schools and be training at our training base. It's fantastic for Rochdale as a whole, I believe.
Yeah, without doubt. I remember the links in the last World Cup over there, which was 2013, I think it was, and I think hosted a couple of games that year, or certainly Fiji were based there, and there was a lot of association. I remember reading up on it and being thrilled with it. So I'm it's a shame you've not got one of the matches, but it's fantastic news that you're doing all that community work. And as you say, it might have in some ways inspired you to do more community work with not having the match. And if they feel welcome and they enjoy it there and you connect with that community, it's all good for Fiji and for Rochdale moving forward.
No, absolutely. I think for us, it's we really one of the big attractions to the club was its history and heritage. It's a 151-year-old club, and that Fijian chapter in the history is a real poignant one, and one that everybody you speak to is really proud of that. And we've still got a Fijian guy in our first team, Joe, and he'll be as proud as anybody. And I think it's just, I can't see the initial impact of losing the game and not being able to stage the game. That was a blow, but ever since we've just turned that into motivation to make this into something really special, and the civic ceremony that we're going to have in with the council, and I'd like to just go on record in thanking the council for the backing and the support as well, because without them, we wouldn't be delivering such an exciting proposition that we are doing. So full raps to our community foundation, to our chief exec Steve. They've worked hard. They've worked wonders to get it to where it is, and it's something that the Rochdale community's wider community can enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And also as well, I suppose for your lads at the club, they're going to get to watch them train and be around them and soak up, like you said, them NRL superstars and the Fijian international superstars. That can only rub off in a good way, can't it?
Absolutely. You learn from the best, don't you? It's
iron sharpens iron, as they say.
That's the old saying, isn't it? And I think you got to touch yourself really, and think to have the NRL world class talent coming to the town, to be able just to, I know they're doing. There's a night going to be on at Rochdale Mayfield where they're going to be, they're going to be involved with the community club and the amateur game, and it's just fantastic for anybody who loves rugby league, and even if you don't love rugby league, just to be able to see that going on in the town and see the excitement around it. It's brilliant. And we're going to still be able to get to the game. A lot of our people that purchase tickets and a few of the box holders and have taken the option of keeping hold of those tickets, and we're going to go to Salford and we'll enjoy that match. That game against the Fijians. England, obviously, I'll have my England hat back on then. It won't be a Fijian hat. I'll be
split loyalty.
Yeah.
We'll enjoy the Fijians up to the point they kick off against England.
Yeah. I've looked after you up until this point, but now you're on your own.
Take both caps, and whoever's winning, you can just keep changing them.
I might do that. I'll see if Carl's got a Doncaster hat on Sunday, and I'll do that. I'll keep swapping them.
Keep swapping them over.
Brilliant.
So now we want to move on to next year, really. As an owner or a chairman of a rugby league club in League One who have a chance in the playoffs, and you're preparing and you've got one eye on next season. So I imagine you started recruitment earlier, or certainly starting looking at that, and that's something that listeners won't see. So they'll see the Twitter feeds when a player is signed and it's being promoted, or we've signed or we've kept a player, but they won't see the work that goes on in the background as you're doing that recruitment, because you can't just point at some players, all right, well, take that one, because they may get offers from other clubs. You'll have to work with them. You can't sign 15 props and be left with no 3/4. So there's a lot of work goes into building a squad. Can you talk us through how your plans have been?
Yeah, I think it just winding back to the decision around the coach, that's linked to it as well. Obviously, we put Gary in temporary charge, but it very quickly became clear to me that he was going to be the right fit for us. So my recommendation to the board was obviously we try and secure Gary on the basis that then we can start to plan for next year, as you speak about. So you want to try and get on the front foot, essentially, don't you? And certainly with your retentions, but also, the coach that you put in place will have his own view on what players he'd like to bring to the club as well as retain. So that was a key part of the decision, really, was to, get Gary, in place. And he thankfully agreed to stay with us and take on the head coach's role for next year. And that played then, obviously you move once that decision's been made and we've ironed out a contract and everything's in place with Gary, we can then move into retentions and recruitment. And obviously, I think the way we've approached that, the last couple of years, we've been one of the highest spending clubs in League One, if I'm honest. I think this year, if you look at Keighley, probably outspent everybody. If you were without knowing the ins and outs, I think it's common knowledge that they've been the highest spenders in the division. And then I think the bookies really get it wrong. And I think after that, Swinton probably have spent more than us. But other than that, I'd estimate that we've been in the top 3 or 4 spenders in that League One for the last couple of years. And we finished 7th in the previous year and 5th this year. So when you spend in top 3, top 4, you'd at least expect to be top 3, top 4, wouldn't you? And that again, that was part of the decision and thinking. But I think where we're going now, obviously, we're probably, not through choice, but by, the things are getting tighter as a result of the funding cuts last year from the RFL and the game generally. So, and obviously we're waiting to see what the outcomes are of the IMG, the reimagination of the sport and the realignment, etc. So we're going to operate a much tighter budget moving forward. And Gary's philosophy is very much around a younger side, a young, hungry team, guys who want to work hard, really train hard, work hard, and play hard. Is that kind of mantra. So we're working on retaining the players that Gary's identified within the squad that he feels are an absolute must, and we're also working on players that can potentially come to the club. But the backdrop of all this is we're involved in a playoff series as well, so some of that gets put on hold, and we do what we need to do in the short term. But I think the message to our supporters is that we are operating a tighter budget, but we're still ambitious at the same time. We want to probably change things a little bit in terms of, I look at the North Wales, you mentioned North Wales model, they've been one of the lower spenders in the division and the higher achievers. So I don't want to be the lowest spender in the division, but I'd like to be in a position where we're punching above our weight moving forward and, getting bang for the buck, if you like, and really, overachieving rather than just sort of achieving, a level. We want to be punching way above that level, and that's the philosophy and what we're going to try and do moving forward. And part of that's by design, and part of that is by the situation that we find ourselves in generally. In that, circumstances, unfortunately, with the football club have been difficult, and that's having. I shouldn't say, it's not hard. It's having still a negative impact on our finances. So, we are going to have to cut the cloth a bit more differently than we have done previously. But that said, there's some exciting young players being retained. We announced last night, young Dan Nixon, who's one of our, outstanding young talents, has just re-signed for us. And as I'm talking to you now, live on air, the announcement will go out on young Ben Killen, the prop forward. So we're slowly starting to drip feed those good news stories out to our speckies now and give them the confidence that we are moving in the right direction, probably doing things a little bit different, but there's still a degree of ambition there. And we want to, if we're still in League One next year, we want to be one of the top boys. And obviously, if we do get promoted to Championship, it'll change things a little bit, but we'll be, it's all about trying to stay in that comp then, isn't it? It's from going from we want to be promoted. It's all about, it's the opposite end. Then you're trying to stay in the division, aren't you?
So those plans don't come without a financial burden and a financial cost. And sometimes a lot of fans and supporters, I'm not saying they're not aware of it, but they kind of lose sight of that. You look at some other clubs and how they're recruiting, whether who they've got behind them or what they've got behind them, but it's a lot of forward planning. It's a lot of budgeting, and it's, can we cut our cloth accordingly, like you said? So it's a tight balance, and it's a tough job, especially when, like you say, you're mid-season, playoffs are coming up. There's a lot of focus there, and like Dave said, one eye on the future, and then you still got to make those plans, but also the abacus is out, isn't it?
No, definitely. I think it's no secret our central funding was cut by 80% last year. So we've operated.
Massive. It's massive.
It's huge, and we've operated the club this year, and we didn't let that impact the squad. We decided that we were going to run. I'm not going to tell any lies. We've operated we've underpinned it to a tune of six figures this year to have the squad that we have, and the backing that that we gave to the coach. And it's obviously it's not getting any easier in terms of the financial side of things, when we've obviously had the issues that we've had in terms of the relationship with the football clubs made life difficult for numerous reasons, not just capacity restrictions, but we've been unable to charge for car parking. We've been able to, there's been a lot of things that probably they're only small things in isolation, but when you put them all together, they create a dent and a hole in your finances. So we've had a lot to deal with this year, and we did decide to run with the squad we ran with to have a crack at it this year, and that was a decision that we made. And as shareholders and owners, I'm not just the sole owner of the club. There's other shareholders and owners. We were committed to that. The club wasn't at any risk, because we said we were going to run with that, and if there's a shortfall or a problem, we deal with it. As owners, that's what you do. And that's probably what people don't understand at times. They might think, well, such a body, Keithley's spending X and such a body's spending X. But what our model generally is based on what comes through the door. And then if we have that bit more ambition as owners, we'll throw the extra money in to do that.
Yeah.
But the business fundamentally will always operate sustainably, because we don't put it at risk. Now, what we're going to have to do next year is operate it more on a sustainable level, with less commitment to underpin any losses, because you don't want to continually be in a cycle year in, year out, where you're running things at a loss, do you? So
no,
we're committed to moving it forward with a bit of ambition, but at the same time, it's ultimately got to be sustainable, and it's got to wash its own face to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're right in saying that you can't continue to keep underpinning it and come in fifth. If you're in the top 3 or 4 spenders, as you say, you'd expect, and you look at most leagues in other sports as well, if you put a list of the salary cost against their position in the league, you'd be surprised how comparable that always is. And one note I've made here, North Wales. How do you think North Wales, operating on a lower budget outside of the heartland, have been able to achieve so much and come third in the league this year and play so well?
I think that's purely down to the coach and the staff there. And I know Anthony very well, and Anthony has punched, as a club, they've punched above the weight. I know for a fact that they are probably in the bottom 3 in terms of spend. I know that they're operating largely with a real tight budget that's nowhere near what we've spent for 2 years. And I've had the conversations. I know what they spend. I know when we speak to players who, and vice versa, they'll talk to our players. We know that our players are earning more money and we've spent more money. And I think to finish third in this competition, and they had the run in the Challenge Cup that they did, and he's been, I think he won the League One Coach of the Year last year. He's been nominated again this year. So I think it's purely down, that's no disrespect to anybody else at North Wales, but I think a coach that's doing sort of things that Anthony's done there with a good staff, and he's created a culture and a team spirit there that's probably unrivaled in fairness to them. They've had a special thing going on with a good group of players, and I think they've just punched above the weight. But everybody can't replicate that. That's obviously quite unique to what they've done. But I think from our perspective, what we want to do moving forward is be more like that than more like what we've done for 2 years, really. Because, and that's not a slant on anybody. That, if anything, that's a criticism of our entire model and our club, myself included, the board. We've not had that. We've probably decided to pay players the money that they've wanted, and have a go at it. And when players have sort of held us, I wouldn't say put us over a barrel, but when players have said, well, such a body's going to pay me more elsewhere, we've been reluctant in the past to say, well, we'll see you next year then. Yeah. Whereas I think now we can only spend what we can spend, and we're going to have to, have those hard conversations. And if people want to go and earn a little bit more money elsewhere, then, good luck to them, and so be it.
Got to let them go. Yeah, I suppose chasing the title based on just finance is risky because only one team can spend the most and only one team can go up. So if you're battling everyone to try and spend more, you're backing yourself into a corner, because if you don't go up, then you think, well, all that money's gone. I have to start again the year after. So only one team can win the league, should I say. It's a risky business plan to just throw money at it. And clubs have come unstuck in the past trying that as a model. It can work at times, but it's high risk. And the most sustainable model is the development model that you've spoke about. So it's nice. How's that going so far?
Yeah, really good, really good. Obviously, from a perspective of recruitment and retention, as I said, we've already started to announce the guys that have re-signed and are staying on board, and that that is from the younger end and the young talent coming through. That's been the key and the focus really, is to get, for obvious reasons, you secure your future talent, don't you, and your young players. So it's going really well, and Gary's having there's. What I've noticed is there's a positivity about the way Gary's doing things, and there's a lot of players who are wanting to come to the club to play for him. Some from over this side of the Pennines, some from over the other side of the Pennines. So it's, I think the balance we want to get right is ultimately we want that young hungry type team that's going to do what we spoke about. Punch above its weight and really have a crack at whatever division we're in next year. It will be a young-looking side. It'll be a hungry side, and a well coached, well disciplined side that really wants to have a go at it. And hopefully that's Championship. But if it's in League One, we'll go again next year in League One.
Sounds really promising. Quite an exciting future, really, for Rochdale. Doing it a little bit different, and I'm sure you'll go well. I'm quite confident you're going to go well in these playoffs as well. I can't wait to watch the games.
You've hit a rich vein of form. We've been keeping a close eye on it, and it's nice to see, Andy, that the Hornets seem to be flying. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, I think obviously it's as we spoke about Doncaster. That's a massive challenge, So you certainly, there's nobody at our club, and you won't hear anybody talking about anything other than Doncaster, or looking past that, because I think that it's a cup final in itself. I think you reach at this stage of a playoffs, you're playing cup finals every week, aren't you? And I know that's the way Gary will view it. Is everything's on this game at the weekend. If we're fortunate enough, and hopefully we get through that, then all the tensions will start looking ahead. But at the moment in time, it's all about Doncaster. Doncaster's a cup final. We'll go into that as underdogs. Let's be clear, because obviously they finished above us. They're in a good vein of form themselves. Other than I know Carl was disappointed at the weekend, but other than that, they've had I think at one stage they'd won something like 7 or 8 games on the bounce, and they were in some real good form. So it's going to be real tricky, a tough one. But I think the spirit's good, and that's key. Like you say, once you get on that bit of a roll and some momentum and form, and I thought we were really convincing on Saturday, probably as well as I've seen us play in certainly my 2.5, 3 years, how long it is I've been at the club. It was the best I've seen us play. So if they can carry that on, I do believe there can be a match for anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, they've got the board behind them. They've got the people like yourselves and the other shareholders who are, and thankfully to you, that you do invest like that in the game at this level for the betterment. And that's what we love about the sport, because without people like yourselves, Andy, it probably wouldn't be what it is. So, I'd like to say thank you to you and the board and all the other shareholders for everything that they do.
I think what you'll find if you speak to anybody, fundamentally we can't do it without the supporters. And I remember coming on your show when we met in Liverpool, and what we've got that I believe is quite unique here is we're really small in terms of numbers, probably a lot smaller than I appreciated when we took the club on. but they're a real loyal bunch, and their hearts are in it. And the All Hornets Supporters Association has been fantastic from a standing start. Those guys are raising really valuable funds and vital funds, and it's a team effort. We can't do it without them. And I think it's pretty much fair to say now, with where the game is, they couldn't do it without us either. So it's a real in it together type mentality. Yeah. And just so anybody watching this from our side of things, from Rochdale perspective, really, the numbers, people will say, why is Keighley doing what they're doing? Why is Barrow doing what they're doing? Well, first and foremost, they've got, Barrow had 2,000 people coming through the gate last year, which means they can push on and they can go into Championship and they can get halfway up Championship this year. And I wouldn't put it past Keighley doing the same. But when you pull that back to the reality of the situation, it's the 2,000 people going through the gate at Barrow that's pushing that club on. It's the 1,600 people at Keighley that are pushing Keighley on. There's no real money men in the background throwing major money at it. So I think what I'm getting at is as owners, we'll help sustain a club. But the only real way you can push a club on is when you get more people come in. And I think there's been little signs this last couple of weeks with the playoffs, starting seeing some new faces, been a new interest. So hopefully we can, whichever way this plays out, we'll get that bit of momentum going into next year, a bit of excitement and more bodies and people coming through the gate, because that's, there's no miracle workers. You'll ask Derek at Lee if Derek's 3,500 crowds at Lee overnight turns to 1,000, he'd have a problem, regardless of how big your bank balance is. If your fans are not there, you've got a problem running a rugby league club. So, the supporters are massively important, and I'd just like to go on record as saying thank you to all Hornets and the wider fan base for the efforts they put in, because while we're not the biggest club in the world and the biggest fan base, we're certainly, I think, pound for pound, I think we'd be up there, Yeah. We might be flyweight in size, but we'd give Evander Holyfield a run in terms of pound.
So those that aren't following the Hornets, who are from the area, that get behind them, join in, become part of this growing community, a thriving community and a passionate community with rugby league at its heart. And I'm 99.9% sure that they won't be disappointed. They'll watch an entertaining game of rugby and be part of something that is, you treat it, and you've said it before, Andy, it's family, isn't it? It's an extended family.
It is, and I think it goes back to what Dave was saying at the outset, is League One, when you come and watch it and you watch it live, it's an outstanding product. And I think, there's the amount of people I've brought to rugby league games that, they might be involved in other sports, they might play football, they've never really seen rugby league. And when you, like that raw product that you talk about, because you can, you get closer to the action and, there's not big crowds and a lot of noise. So you feel the crunches, you feel the tattles, don't you? You feel, you hear the coaches, you see the passion of the coaches.
Hear the thud of the boot on the grass.
And it's that, for me, is the biggest thing about League One is it's that, I remember years ago they used to run a programme called Rugby League Raw, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they focused on the second tier and the third tier and all the passion that came with it. And there was a few expletives in the dressing rooms, and I think it was heard late on a Friday night, so there was no kids watching. But I think you see all that side of it, don't you? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that as from a family aspect we don't want foul language and things, but what I'm getting at is that your sort of raw side of the game is, you can't fail to be impressed with it, can you? It's a real. You just tip your hat to the players, because they get up, like you said, they get up and they go to work on a Monday morning, and the stuff they put the bodies through, for relatively small amounts of money, really, at those levels, you've got to take your absolute respect to them, because without them players and without, referees get a lot of stick, but without people putting their hand up to do these things, we wouldn't have a sport to watch, would we?
No.
That's right. The referees do a great job, and as I said earlier, the entertainment value in League One is brilliant. It's a superb game to watch. So I'd urge fans of Rochdale and other League One clubs, get down and just enjoy the day. Take your family, take the children. You'll see a great product. You'll be entertained, and it's really good value. And the more people go along, the more people get to enjoy it and talk about it. So we'll hopefully see you and many others at other League One or maybe Championship games in the future.
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, it's been a pleasure to talk to you again. Again, you've given us some great insight from the community, from the club, you know, from the grassroots level upwards of how it goes and the passion that's involved. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks for coming on. And thanks to everybody who's listened. This is the Dockhouse Rugby Show. Thanks from Dave, myself, and Andy Mazey. The Dockhouse Rugby Show is proud to support the Teardrops Homeless Charity. Teardrops, supporting your community.